Hello and welcome to In Our Generation. This is a program where we discuss the news from a Christian worldview. Today, we have a few headlines we want to get to. The first one is a video that has been posted on social media showing the initiation ritual for the Proud Boys. Now, I have to warn you that this video has very graphic depiction of violence. You might want to cover your kids' eyes if they're in the room. In fact, you might need to cover your own eyes to watch this. So I will start the video here in a second, but I will warn you, this is very graphic. The Proud Boys have a very graphic, very violent initiation ceremony that they put their new members through, and you definitely need to be warned. This is something, you have not seen anything like this before. This is going to be the most violent, the most graphic violence you have ever seen. You definitely need to cover your eyes. I'm going to start this video right now, so please be aware that you've been warned about the graphic nature of this video.
Okay.
The man in the white shirt is about to be initiated.
I am a proud boy.
All right. I am a Western chauvinist,
I'm a Western chauvinist.
and I
These are
refuse
what
to
he has
apologize
be. I'm a Western
To
chauvinist.
apologize
for creating the modern world.
for creating a modern world. Gentlemen, 3, 2,
Now look, no. Oh my.
One, Cheerios.
Oh,
Two, Frosted
look at
Flakes.
this.
Three,
This
Cocoa
is
Puffs.
horrible.
Four.
Oh, if you're not
I like it.
By the way, when he goes to the ground, you're allowed to elbow.
Yeah, Trump's out. Fucking Macho Man off there.
We need a turnbuckle if anyone has one.
and filmed this at great risk of their own life. That I apologize if any of the viewers were offended at that. You won't be able to get this image out of your head forever. This is burned into your very psyche, the nature of this violence. I don't know much about the Proud Boys. It's not something I'm very concerned with or very interested in. I just see this video and this I see this video posted throughout social media, and for some reason this is extremely offensive, and people are using this to prove that somehow the Proud Boys are rooted and founded in horrible violence. I have to say I haven't seen this level of violence since my daughter had her last slumber party and they engaged in an enormous pillow fight. If anyone thinks that this is somehow depicts that any group, whoever is doing it, is a violent group, I would say this shows that they are a bunch of overgrown children who have some initiation thing where they pretend to pummel each other in such a mild fashion that your masseuse is harder on you than that. I haven't seen such level of viciousness since I watched The Karate Kid. I mean, this is the level of violence that this arises to. So if that's the worst that this group has to offer, well then I don't know that we need to worry too much about them. I'm not sure that is depicting any serious degree of violence. Now maybe they're engaged in something else. Maybe they're doing something they shouldn't, and if so, then they need to be looked into by proper authorities. But if this is the best example you have of how dangerous the Proud Boys are, I'm not too concerned of a group of overweight, pudgy, overgrown men who are doing essentially what young men do inside their tree houses. I think this is a lot of pearl-grasping soccer moms who don't know how boys act, because that there was how young boys act. If you want to hear horror stories of initiation ceremonies amongst men, then you should read what the Navy SEALs do when they pound their medals deep into the chest of the initiates. So that was, I thought, very humorous actually when I saw that. The second piece of news I thought we might want to discuss today, moving on to something a little more serious, is the issue of student debt forgiveness. Assuming Biden becomes president of the United States, he has said that within the first 100 years, he's going to forgive student loans. And this has a lot of conservatives really worked up. Unless, I guess, they have a student loan, and then they're probably on the fence maybe. You know, it's hard to stick to your principles when it benefits you not to. So who knows? Maybe there's some conservatives that aren't too worked up about it because they have student loans. But excuse me, it does have a lot of people worked up with the idea of student loan forgiveness. And one of the reasons is they feel that they are going to have to, that they're going to have to be paying off the loans for other people. That they either paid off their own loans already, or they forewent going to college and didn't have loans, and now they're going to pay off the loan of somebody who did go to college and got their degree, and now they have to pay off the loan. And I understand, I mean, from a fairness perspective, which the left allegedly is very concerned about everyone paying their fair share, well, that certainly doesn't seem very fair to anybody that somebody who didn't go to college or went to college and worked their way through and didn't have a loan, or had a loan, got a job, and really scrimped and paid off the loan. For those people who don't have loans at this moment, to pay off the loans for those who do, well, that seems to be extraordinarily unfair. However, there's a couple things that you might want to consider about this. And this is not I'm not advocating for the idea of paying off student loans. We'll get to that in a minute. But you might want to consider that most of you who are very offended at this probably do not pay enough taxes that you're paying off anybody's loan. In fact, most of us, myself included, are probably not even coming close to paying what we should be paying. We're not even paying our fair share. I know that it's very it's very fashionable to talk about how the millionaires and billionaires don't pay their fair share. But this comes from people who are either cynical, right? They're cynical and they're just saying what is politically expedient, or from B, they are economically illiterate and they don't know what's actually happening in the country. If you know what's actually happening in this country, then you know that the only people that are paying their fair share are the billionaires and maybe the millionaires, but certainly the billionaires. The billionaires are paying their fair share. When we look at the percentage, when we look at taxes and who pays what percentage of it, the majority of taxes are paid by a very small minority of people. The top 10% of the country pay an overwhelming majority of the taxes. It's like 80%. So the top 10%, 10% of the people in this country pay 80% of the taxes. That sounds pretty fair to me. That sounds a little like really fair, like a little almost too fair. Super fair, very super fair. And so believing that somehow if you're not a millionaire, and I suspect anyone listening to what I have to say isn't even close to being a millionaire, you're probably not even a thousandaire. And if we counted in negative, right, then maybe you're a minus 2,000-aire, minus 20,000-aire. You have maybe you're close to 100,000 in debt, and so you're a negative 1,000-aire. You are most likely not even coming close to paying taxes for what you consume, for the part of the country that corresponds to you. Imagine if we were to take just the military expenses, because most conservatives who are going to be upset about student debt forgiveness probably favor a strong military. We might vary on degrees on how strong, but you probably favor a strong military. So let's just take the military expenditures as an example. And let's say we took how much our government spends on the military expenditures, on equipment, on material, on soldiers, wages, all of that, all the expenses that go into keeping the military going. And we divide that amongst the number of people in the country. Do you think you even come close to paying that percentage of the military deployment that you think is so important, that most of you conservatives are all for and think that we should definitely have a strong military? Do you think you actually pay your fair share? I doubt that. I doubt any of us do. I doubt any of us even pay for a very small fraction of what would be our corresponding amount. I bet even if we divided it by dollars earned, so the more money you make, the more greater percentage you should have to pay. So proportional to your income, I doubt you're paying your fair share. And that's just the military. What about roads? What about police? What about firefighters? What about every other feature of this country that keeps this country going? You and I are not even coming close to paying our fair share. It's not us that they're going to be extracting student debt loan forgiveness from. So if you're worried that you're going to have to pay for someone else's college, I think you can rest assured you're not paying for anything. Now, that doesn't mean that this is okay. I'm not for soaking the rich. I actually think that we probably should be paying higher taxes, and millionaires and billionaires should be paying less taxes. It doesn't seem fair to me that 10% of the country pay 80% of the taxes. That doesn't seem fair. And so if we're not going to raise taxes on you and I, who don't make very much money, then we're going to need to lower our total expenditures so that the people who are making more money aren't being soaked. But they're the ones that allegedly would be on the hook for this. Of course, that goes to the common leftist trope that you can tax the billionaires and pay for everything. I was just reading about the economic bailout of 2008, and they gave AIG, just one bank, AIG, of many that they bailed out. But AIG, they gave them $85 billion. That's just one bank, one time, $85 billion. That's half the wealth of Jeff Bezos, meaning Jeff Bezos could bail out two banks one time and then be flat broke. If you took every penny from every billionaire in America, you'd barely scratch the surface. You wouldn't put a dent in the problems that they're thinking that they can solve by raising the tax rate on the billionaires by 5% or 10% or 20%. You raise the tax rate on billionaires by 20%, and if they don't find a way around them, if they don't find a way to get through loopholes and squeeze around them and relocate their funding and get it offshore, if they don't do any of that and they actually pay 20% more, which history says they do not, but if they did, it wouldn't do anything. Nothing. It'd be like saying that if you spill a teaspoon of water in the ocean, you'll overflow it and flood some low-lying country. 1 teaspoon makes no difference. And 20% from billionaires is almost nothing in comparison to the amount of money that's needed to do what they're saying they want to do. All these wonderful projects that the government is supposedly going to do, a 20% increase on billionaires is not going to do anything to achieve that. The problem with student loans, going back to this point, the problem with student loan and student loan forgiveness is that it's just honeypotting the issue. It's going to only draw more of the cause of these problems. What is causing the problem of student loan? This is going to exacerbate it. The problem with student loans is that the government is involved in this. They're guaranteeing the loans. This incentivizes universities and colleges to raise their prices. This is why tuition levels have gone up multiple times inflation rate. Inflation has gone up, but college and university tuition has more than tripled the inflation rate. Why is that? Well, because the government started to guarantee college loans. So colleges know they're going to get paid. They know they're going to get paid. So when Biden comes out now and says, and many others, and say that they're going to forgive student loans, what they're actually saying is that the government is going to pay off the loans. Colleges are fine with that. That'll be very happy. And they act like that's going to lower the cost of college. Forgiving student loans is going to raise the cost of college because it's going to incentivize more people to go to college and university that they cannot afford, which will mean that the demand for college goes up. And when the demand goes up, economic law is very simple. The price goes up. The more people who want to go to college because they're being incentivized by free money to go to college, the more people that want to go to college increases the demand of college. Colleges will respond as any market would when they see an influx of greater demand by raising their prices because they can afford to. If people stop going to college because they couldn't afford to go to college, then colleges would lower their prices to attract people to come. This is how it works in every area of the market, and this is how colleges work. And colleges know that. They have economists working there. They know that this is how it works. But they very much appreciate that the government is stepping in and breaking this free market relationship between the consumer and the provider. And that's what the government does. The government guarantees a loan. That makes that money free for the borrower, or at least in his mind free, and it makes it risk-free for the lender, who is the college in this case. So the lender, think of it this way. If Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or one of these ultra-rich people were to come into your neighborhood and say that they are going to guarantee any mortgage, any home loan in this neighborhood to anyone who wants to buy a house, do you think that would raise the price of houses in your neighborhood or lower the price of houses? Do you think your house would now be worth all of a sudden more or less? Well, obviously it's going to be worth a whole lot more. If you know that Jeff Bezos is going to guarantee, or let's say in this case, the U.S. government is going to guarantee that that loan will be paid no matter what happens, even if the mortgage owner, even if the buyer, the guy who borrows the money, even if he is unable to pay, the government will pay the money. House prices will shoot through the roof. This is what happened in 2008. This is what's happening right now. The government is giving out very cheap loans, guaranteeing them and incentivizing banks to give loans to people who really can't afford them. This is what they're doing with college. The government is guaranteeing the loans, that is incentivizing lenders to loan money to kids to go to college who have no business going to college because, one, maybe they simply don't have the scholastic abilities for it, or they don't have the economic means for it, or they don't have the ambition and drive for it. But for whatever reason, there are a lot of people in universities and colleges that have no business being there. This drive in our country to try to say that every single person should go to college is a mistake. What do you think would happen to, let's say, Toyota Corolla prices? If you convince from the time that children are born, you convinced every single person in this country that they must own a Toyota Corolla. Must own a Toyota Corolla. Everybody needs a Toyota Corolla. Toyota Corollas are a human right, and everybody deserves one. Do you think Toyota would sell Corollas cheaper or more expensive? If they could get not only the government, but every marketing agency, every media company, and every dad and mom in the entire nation to market their product. This is what's happening in colleges. Colleges have convinced everybody in the country, practically, to market their product, to sell their product. This isn't something they're selling when you hit 18 or 20. They are telling you this from the day you're born, is being drilled in your head that you must go to college. Talk about subliminal messaging. Coca-Cola, in its wildest dreams, never had a marketing arm like colleges do. Now, what do you think that does to the price of college when you have an entire nation convinced they must attend college? Do you think that'll raise the price or lower the price? So that's what's happening. And when you go and you forgive student debt the way they're talking about, that just incentivizes more, not less. That's going to balloon the debt. Now you say, well, what if they just give away the college? And then there won't be no debt. There's nothing free. Now it may be that the actual students going to college have no debt, but the debt will exist and it'll actually be greater. When you go and you take out money without any type of government backing or government incentivizing or any type of government intervention, well, then you're going to look for very low interest rates. You're going to borrow the money you know you can afford to pay back. And the lender is going to be very careful that those things are also looked at with due diligence and not going to loan you money you can't afford to pay. That's what happens when you go and borrow money in a real world situation. Like if you want to borrow money to buy a car, right? The government has no incentive programs to get lenders to loan money to people to buy cars. And so when you buy a car, you have to borrow money that you can afford because you know that car can be repoed at any moment if you don't make the payments. And they just drive up with a tow truck, hook up, and take it off. And everyone knows that can happen. And so you're very careful to make your car payment. I know people who stiff everybody else, but they make the car payment because that's how that works. And because of that, car loans are very accessible. They're very affordable, and they generally get paid back. If the government got involved in car loans and decided that everybody should have a car loans would balloon, car prices would shoot way up. Nobody would be able to afford a car. Loans would be 50 or 60-year loans on a car that's going to last you 10 or 15 or 20 years. This is what's happened to the housing prices. This is what's going to happen to student loan prices. And by giving it away free, all you're really saying is you're going to pass that off into hidden taxes, and that the people that are borrowing the money are actually going to pay the money back at much higher interest rates, at much longer terms, and for multi-generations, but through taxation and through the money devaluing through inflation. So, I think we should be outraged over the idea of forgiving student loan, but not from the standpoint that many people are. We should be outraged that the government is involved in student loans, that the government has decided that everybody needs to drink from the bottle from birth of student loans and of college tuition and going to college and going to university. Now, I know many of you would probably be appalled that anyone would suggest that not everybody should go to college. In fact, I think very few people should go to college. Only the brightest, only the most ambitious, only the smartest. Everyone else should not be going to college. And you say, well, how do we weed that out? Well, one is you quit telling everyone that they have to go to college. Two, you make college be a real cost. Right? No more affirmative action stuff. No more pushing minorities in, pushing whoever in. Anybody who is able, anybody who is scholastically inclined and ambitious enough and can afford it goes to college. And if you can't, you don't. Now, I realize this makes for some groups of people to make it more difficult for them to get there, perhaps. But this is how the market works everywhere else. The market is not nice, and it certainly isn't clean and tidy. But what we have now with the government backing the loans, well, that's just a mess. All right. So let's talk about something else. There was a video that got released on social media also that I'll play you. This one's actually a little more serious. Let's look at this video and then we'll discuss it here. This is in Buffalo, New York.
These people actually work for their money, and they don't want to lose their livelihood. I've lost friends, I've lost family who've killed themselves. I've seen clients die because they've lost their livelihood.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I know you are, and I'm asking for you to guys have some compassion for the people that have lost everything.
We do have compassion for people who...
Okay, well, you need to go have compassion out in the parking lot. This is private property.
This is
private property. This is private property. It's private property. Go get a warrant. Listen, man, this is private property. They're not wanted here. So do your jobs.
Well, her job is...
Well, no, your job is to remove people that are not wanted here.
You have a
We're wanted here. They're not.
She's
hiding her name tag. She had her
I'm
name
not.
tag.
It's right here. It's marked here. You can see my name.
They're just doing their job.
There we go.
You should all be wearing masks. How come
I'm not
none of you
doing
have
anything
masks
wrong.
on?
Don't worry about my health. My health isn't your
You're
concern.
meant to be wearing a mask. It's a government.
Okay, well, then write me up.
It's the law.
Okay, then take me to jail.
It's not the law.
Then take me to jail.
Show me the law.
Show me the law, please. Show me the law.
Well, I think we gotta go down.
You have to leave. You guys have to leave.
You guys need to leave.
have to leave.
Right now, you're trespassing without a warrant. You need
Mass civil disobedience
you need
starts
to
now.
leave. You're trespassing.
We're not trespassing.
You're trespassing.
Doesn't matter. We have a right to be here.
Then get a warrant, dude. Go get a warrant.
Bring a warrant.
Go get a warrant.
Trespass.
You do.
Come back with a warrant or leave.
Don't write the law.
Outside. No, go on your
They've
phone
been asked to
outside.
leave several
Go on your phone
occasions.
outside.
I would really like it if you
Where
would
did you
stop
hear the
shouting at me.
report
I haven't
from?
done
Okay, we
anything
can look
wrong.
at that right now. We would like
Where?
leave.
Who reported
Go
it?
leave.
Who reported it? Who reported it?
You know what? I don't know.
Yeah,
Because
it's anonymous, right?
Yes,
It's
it
anonymous.
is.
It
But it's
can't be
legitimate
anonymous.
complaint.
You need to
It
know
can
your
be,
accuser. You need to
that's
know it
not-
cannot
Okay,
be
well,
anonymous.
you gotta go get a warrant.
It
That's not
cannot
how
be
health
anonymous.
department-
It cannot be
You
anonymous.
gotta go get a
You
warrant.
don't get
You
to
gotta go
write
get a
the
warrant.
policies. You
It's
don't get to
code
violate the
enforcement.
Constitution. It
This
does
isn't
not
the
matter.
same
You
as
don't
that.
circumvent or subvert the Constitution.
Okay, Miss, you need to leave.
All right. So that happened in Buffalo, New York, where two sheriffs were accompanying a health official in because a business was not compliant to their health guidelines of wearing masks and maybe, I don't know all the full details, but certainly was wearing masks was one of the things that the health official cited. And a lot of people are very happy about this, about how these people have stood up for their rights, and they have kicked those people out of there, kicked out the sheriffs, ran them out through civil disobedience. And I think there's a certain aspect to which people have a right to that level of civil disobedience. I don't think that they were in any way disrespectful to officials, and I think that we have every right to demand that officials be held accountable, that they are doing their job properly, that they are doing it with the correct documentation, the correct paperwork, the correct approvals and authorizations from the proper authorities. And it seems to me that the case can be made that that is what was happening, that these people were acting completely within the boundary of respectful but deliberate and forceful civil disobedience. By forceful, I don't mean physical force, but with moral force. Chanting, telling them to leave, holding their ground, standing up. So that certainly is better than the type of protest that we're seeing from the left, where this would have been spitting in the officer's face, cursing at them, calling them names, threatening them, pushing them even, if in some cases. and then, lobbing Molotov cocktails and rocks at them from somewhere where they can't be seen. So none of that was happening. So this was definitely a very peaceful protest, no doubt about that. However, is this the kind of country that we want to be in, where sheriffs and health officials are being run out of businesses when they're trying to do their job? And I'm torn about this, and I think you should be as well. As much as part of me likes to see a business that is seeing that they're battling just to stay afloat, and they're the ones that they feel they're the ones that pay the taxes that keep society moving, and they're struggling just to not lose their livelihood, and to see them stand up for themselves in this way, there's a certain part of me that believes that that's admirable. At the same time, I'm not sure I want to live in a society where police can be backed down like that. I don't like it when I see the left doing it and forcing the police to take a knee to them, or to do other things like we saw at the beginning of the Black Lives Matter riots. I don't like to see it when the right is doing it. Now, I don't know what the answer is. What I do know, or perhaps I suspect, what I strongly suspect, is that you can't win against the state like this. Just because those sheriffs left at the end of this video, that doesn't mean they're not coming back. And when they come back, they could very well be coming back with arrest warrants. They could very well be coming back with search warrants. They could coming back with health officials to do inspections. And this is the thing about the government. They have all the time in the world and all the resources in the world. And it's very difficult to actually beat them. They have more weapons than you can imagine, without even counting physical weapons like guns and jails. But they can come in and do health audits and fire inspections and electrical inspections and health inspections. If you have a kitchen, they can. And this is the thing. I work in construction, and we have to go through inspections all the time, for all kinds of inspections. I install everything I do in construction work. It comes under regulations of what's called ADA guidelines and TAS guidelines. That stands for Americans with Disabilities Act, which is the federal handicap laws that make everything accessible to people with handicaps, with disabilities. And then you have the TAS, which is the Texas Accessibility Standards, because I'm in Texas. And everything I do falls under those regulations. And there is a regulation for everything in a commercial building. Everything. Every doorknob, every coat hook, every toilet paper holder, everything, mirrors, things you wouldn't believe fall under the regulation of federal and state guidelines for accessibility. And almost no building is 100% compliant. I'll tell you that right now. Practically no building I've ever been in or worked in is 100% compliant. There are some regulations that are simply impossible to be compliant with, because then you would be non-compliant with plumbing codes. There are plumbing codes that are contradictory to state and federal accessibility standards. There is a PragerU video where one of their presenters talks about all the regulations that he had to go through to be able to sell cookies, and how there were two competing regulations about which way his kitchen doors had to swing. One government agency required them to swing out, and the other one required them to swing in. And whichever one happened to stop by to check him, they would fine him. If I remember right, it was like a $10,000 fine for having his door swinging the wrong way. He eventually had to buy two different sets of doors and have them both there. And whoever showed up to inspect, they would quickly put on the doors that swung the proper way. This is all the time. If the government wants to get even, if the government wants to make their point, if they want to enforce, make you comply, there's a million ways they can do this. All legal. They can find 15 different violations without even trying. And each one of those will carry penalties and fines. I'm not convinced that the people that are applauding this and are suggesting that all business owners act this way understand. Because they keep saying things like, well, they can't arrest everybody. They can't force everybody. They can't come in and fine everybody. Well, that's true. Perhaps that's true. It's true they can't arrest everybody, but it's not true. Excuse me, it's not true they can't fine everybody. But even if they can't fine everybody, even if they can't arrest everybody, they can't fine everyone who speeds. But you don't have to. All you have to do is fine enough people, right? There is a tipping point at which, and that tipping point is where not complying becomes statistically unprofitable. Where you know that statistically you are more likely to get fined yourself. And as soon as you make that decision, as soon as you make that calculation, well then it's no longer profitable to resist. It becomes a lose-lose situation. But beyond that, what do you think this does to the rule of law if when sheriffs and health officials who have been authorized by the government, whether you agree with it or not, whether you think it's constitutional or not, they've been authorized by the government and they can be basically forced out and forced to not execute their duty? Where does that leave society? Let's say we all banded together and did this, and we forced the police completely out of our businesses and out of our lives because we've determined that what they're trying to enforce is unconstitutional law. Where does that leave society with a demoralized police force? Nowhere good. This is not going anywhere good. I don't know what the answer is here, but I don't think it looks like that. I'm not convinced that there is anything wrong with the mask mandates that the government wants to put on. I know many of you hate them, and I hate the masks, but I'm not really against the mask mandates. I don't think I would do it if I were in charge, but who knows? There's an enormous amount of pressure to do something, anything. And that's basically what I think the masks are. It is an attempt to do something, anything. Even if it isn't actually meaningful, do something. So I don't think I would put them on. I don't think I would make a mask mandate if I was the governor of Texas. But I'm not against the mandates. And I don't think that it is in the best interest of a business or of the nation to respond to these this way. We have all kinds of mandates, right? I mean, people are making a big deal that the government is forcing you to wear a mask to enter into a store. But you have to wear a shirt. You have to wear pants. You have to wear shoes. Right? You have to wear clothing. Is this somehow some horrible mandate that the government, the federal government would, or the state government would demand that you actually have clothes on to go into a store, that you wear sleeves, that you have shoes on if you want to go into a fast food restaurant? Is this some intrusive mandate that you have to mask your feet? You have to mask your feet. You have to mask your armpits. This is terrible. We've all gotten along just fine with these mandates. I'm not convinced that the mask mandate is much different than that. But even if it is, there comes a point where you have to ask, is this really what we want to blow up the country over? Is this really what we want to blow up the sheriff's departments and the police departments and the health departments? Is this the sword we want to lay on? Is this the ground we want to die on? I'm not convinced it is. Now, it might be getting close to there. For instance, the actual shuttering of businesses and putting people out of business because you deem that they're non-essential, while government employees are all getting full wages. That may be approaching a point where, yeah, we say absolutely. That has become the sword for us to die on. Anyway, I don't think that was handled very properly. And this is a thing, you got to be careful with these videos. They all stop right there where there's victory. I'm pretty sure those people came back. I suspect that that's not where it ended. They probably didn't come back that night. They may not have come back that week. But here's the thing, they can fine everybody. And those fines, they don't go away. And when you go to get your license renewed, then they arrest you. When you get stopped for a speeding ticket, they run your name, they find out there's a warrant for your arrest because you have an unpaid non-compliance fine, and then you go to jail. And nobody knows about it. It happens maybe 3 months later. I have people work for me that have been arrested years later. And they had some fine that they didn't pay in some county somewhere, and they thought, they can't force me to pay. They're not going to come find me. You don't understand how government works. This is because we watch movies where the detective is the hero, and he lives and breathes this case. And that's all he cares about is solving the case. That's not how law enforcement works at all. The cases, they get assigned cases, dozens of them a day, some of them. And they do their little part on them. My father-in-law, he did the fingerprinting when he was in SAPD. He fingerprints it, and then he passes the information on to someone else who then runs down his part. And everyone does their little part, and it works its way through the system. These people thought they were resisting police officers. And those police officers weren't sure how to proceed at that point, certainly did not want to get into any type of altercation. Very wise on their part. I thought they showed tremendous humility and discretion, and so they backed away from the thing. But you're not fighting the police officers. You're fighting the system, and it is an enormous machine that never sleeps. You're not going to tire out one police officer and he's going to decide it's not worth it anymore. The machine never gets tired. The machine never quits pursuing justice. And there will be somebody else, and then someone else, and an endless number of somebody else's who will come in and they're going to enforce that rule. And so unless you're talking about burning down the entire system, then you're really just making things hard on yourself. So it's something that has to be thought about and considered. All right, so those are the points, our headlines that I wanted to talk about today. We will look at some other current headlines later on. So the show is called In Our Generation. It is a news show, if you want to call it that, a commentary news show from a Christian perspective and worldview. And I hope you enjoyed it. If you do, subscribe to our channel, the Freeborn Church channel, and hit the little bell to be notified. You can also follow me on Twitter at Freeborn Podcast. That is my Twitter handle, and you can follow me there. And I will be talking to you next time.